Have you ever been in a business meeting and someone is telling a story and you're really on the edge of your seat and everybody's listening and you can kind of hear a pin drop in the audience, and then the story ends and everyone kind of sits back and there's a collective exhale because nobody's really sure why that story was being told and everyone is a bit confused. Today we are going to be talking about mistake number 2 in the storytelling series, which is called Move It Along. So as a leader, you know that it's absolutely vital. It's a vital skill to be able to tell stories because it increases connection with your teams, your customers, your strategic partners, people higher up in the business. It makes you and the thing that you're talking about so much more memorable, 22% more memorable, and it increases your impact. But we want to avoid the idea that we are telling stories to entertain, because we're not. In a business context, entertainment is part of that process and audiences do need to be engaged, but that is not the point of the story. The point of a business story is that we're adding value. And we really need to keep that in mind when we are curating our stories, creating our stories, and telling our stories. So today we're going to be talking about the 3 things that you need to do to walk that tightrope between entertainment and engagement and adding value. So, number 1, suspense, right? Human beings love suspense. We love twisty-turny movies. We love cliffhangers in a book. We really enjoy this idea of, oh my goodness, anticipation. What is going to happen? It feels really good for a human being, but it only really feels for good if we get that loop closed, that information loop that gets opened at the beginning. It has to get closed. Otherwise, it can feel a bit unsatisfying. So using suspense is a great way to keep your audience engaged and curious. But too many open loops, too much suspense, too much twisting and turning will leave your audience confused and disengaged and probably a bit exhausted as well because they're mentally trying to follow the process. So we don't want to be doing that. So the way that we can avoid that is have the learning point up front. So what is it you want your audience to really know, understand, think, feel, or do? Make that your headline, just like you would if you were writing an article, a brochure, anything, an essay. You always have your kind of point and then you illustrate it. That's really, really important. So illustrate the point, then tell your story and include a bit of suspense, but not too much. So for example, say you were talking to an audience about a new project and a new project that's hit a few roadblocks. You might want to use a story of a similar kind of project that happened in the past, similar kind of roadblocks that occurred, how those teams overcame those roadblocks with their mindset, with practical things that they did, with innovation, any of those aspects. We want to bring all of that in so that we can share the learning, share the inspiration, and share the success. So we're telling this team, it's okay. You're not the only team that's found this, and we were going to be able to move you forward. We want to make sure we give them the sort of highlight the takeaways for them in that process. So make your point, illustrate the story, make sure there's takeaways for this particular audience. The second mistake that I see people make when they are telling business stories is, what's your point and why should they care? So we need clarity, first of all. So it's no good just telling a story. You need absolute clarity on why you're telling that story. So if we go back to that previous example of a team that's working on a project and we've hit a bit of a roadblock, the clarity piece around that is like, I want them to know they're not alone, and I want them to know success is still possible, and I want them to know that we have their backs. So that might be your intention. So now you've got that clarity, you're like, well, what story do I tell? And it becomes much easier to curate and collect the right kinds of stories for the right kinds of audience. So we want to be thinking about our intention first of all. I want them to help them feel secure, they're not alone. I want to help them feel that this is still possible, so I want to inspire them. And I want to give them some practical advice about what they could do at this point. So now we're very, very clear on our intention. Now, the second bit of this is you've got to start thinking about where are they? So they're probably frustrated. They might be a bit fearful that the project might get canned or that the whole team might get let go. And they're probably a little bit stressed because their individual inputs aren't making a difference at this point. So Now we know where they are, it might be easier to find the right kinds of language to help them feel better and help them think about how they could create innovation, or they could change their mindsets, or they could draw in other members of the organization to help solve this particular problem. Because now we know what anecdote we need to tell them, it becomes much, much clearer. So what's your point? So what's your intention? Where are they and how are they feeling? And what anecdote is going to help soothe or sort both of those issues out in one go? Now, the third mistake that I see people making in business stories of this kind is this concept of move it along. So it can be really difficult when you're telling a story to know what to include and what not to include. Right? Stories are really helpful. They're really useful. They have twisty turns. There's lots of information. We need to make sure we're including the right content. But how do you work out what's the right content? This is a really easy way to think about it. Number one, does it move the story along? So does this piece of information help move the story along in terms of the plot, in terms of the strategy, in terms of whatever? Does it move it along? Yes or no? No, ditch it. Yes, keep it. Number two, does it move the audience emotionally? Does it make them feel differently about something? If it does, keep it. If it doesn't, bin it. So does it move the plot along? Does it move the emotion of the audience? If it does, keep it. If it doesn't, get rid of it. You do not need it in this particular story. So essentially what we've talked about today is that we need these open loops. We need to create suspense in the story, but too much and you will lose your audience. So think about your point first of all. What is it you're trying to tell them? And then illustrate it with a story. Make sure you are absolutely clear about your intention behind that story and where they are, and that those story matches those two things and will help them. And then make sure that it's concise, that it's neat, that it serves the purpose that you are trying to serve, and it either needs to move the story along or move your audience emotionally. And if it doesn't do either of those things, get rid of it. Use it another time, or maybe not at all. I hope that you have found today's video really useful. Please like, subscribe, and comment on this particular video and share it with people if you think it will be useful. There are 5 other videos in this series talking about the 6 common mistakes that I see people making in business storytelling. Tell us what you'd like to know about. If there's more things that you would like us to make videos on, just let us know. We'd be more than happy to do that. Don't forget, subscribe, like, and comment, and we'll see you really soon. Bye for now.